What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who served time at other prisons. We're going to be talking about life before prison, life in prison, life out of prison. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you've built up in your own mind. Okay, folks, here we go. This person that I have on today, I got to tell you, I wouldn't be surprised. The person I have today, Ronald Simpson Bey, welcome.
Thank you, Brent. Glad to be here.
So I was just talking to Ronald before we get started here. His story is something that you go and you buy a ticket to at a movie theater and you walk out thinking, oh my gosh, how in the world did that happen? How did he survive? And on top of that, Ronald was nice enough to send me some information ahead of time, and this is an optimistic guy. This is a guy that's loving life. You were, Ronald, in prison for 27 years. Now you won or overturned your conviction in 24 years, but it took you another 3 years to get out. And I want to get into talking about that because I don't think people even understand how that can happen.
Exactly.
But what happened to you within those years is what's so fascinating. And just getting into, first of all, thank you for being here. This is a great opportunity for a lot of reasons, but just to learn some different pieces of all these things that you did. And it's an inspiring story, but going back to the beginning, can you tell us a little bit, Ronald, about what little Ronald was doing and how you were growing up?
Well, I mean, I lived in I grew up with two parents. You know, I grew up in a two-parent home. My dad was a school teacher. My mom was a homemaker, and this was in the 60s and the 70s. And I thought I lived, a pretty wholesome life. We traveled all summer during the summers. We had vacations. And so I've lived a pretty well-rounded life from that perspective. But internally, there was chaos inside the home because my dad was abusive. And, I grew up thinking that, trauma was normal, being beaten by your parents. I thought that was a normal thing. It's like you subject to it for so long, it becomes natural. It took me becoming an adult to actually realize I was living in a dysfunctional home. And so, I mean, I was a great high school student. I was a star athlete in high school. I was a state championship in track and field. I played football and basketball. I got good grades. I went to Eastern Michigan on track scholarship until I broke my ankle and lost a scholarship. And ended up coming back to Michigan back home in 76, 77, and hired into General Motors and began my life as a young adult. Married my first wife in 1977 and had two children by her. So when you were growing up and you had that going, you had siblings that were in the house. Did you guys talk about the fact that, things are kind of crazy, or was it just truly, and I noticed you guys had like a van of some size you guys traveled around in, which that's a great look. I mean, that looks like a great family. The Partridge family had their own bus. Here you go. Exactly. It's funny because we started camping in 1965, and it was just three of us, three children at the time. I'm the oldest of five children. Yeah. There were three of us in 65. We had an Opel Cadet. You probably never even heard of it. It's a subcompact. And we had a rack on the top of it with a tent and all the stuff in the trunk. And we traveled around camping, and we were the only black people in a campground all over the United States, which was at the time, I was like an 8 or 9 year old kid. So I didn't know the difference between black and white, and we progressed from that Opel Cadet and a tent. Then we bought a van and a trailer. Then we ended up buying a 30-foot motorhome.
Wow. That's some traveling.
Yeah, we did a lot of travel. We traveled all summer every year.
So, and following up on when things went to the next step, okay, you get with General Motors and you get a weird phone call one day.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ronald?
Sure. I was at the time I had been working at General Motors I hired in GM in 76 after I left Eastern Michigan. And this was in 1980, 4 years later. I was a journeyman tool and die maker. Went on gym apprenticeship program and got my journeyman's card as a tool and die maker. And one day I'm at work on second shift, and my wife called. At the time, this is before cell phones and all this.
Sure.
The supervisor called me to the office. Hey, your wife is on the phone. You need to go to the office and talk to her. So I went to the office, and she's telling me, hey, you need to come home right now. She was pregnant with my son at the time, and I'm thinking, something's wrong with the pregnant. Are you okay? She said, I'm okay, but you need to come home right now. Something's going on at your parents' house. So I get to the house, and she said, that you need to go to your parents' house right now because your mom has shot your dad. I'm like, what? So I go to the house, and it's about 2 or 3 miles away from where I was living, where they lived, and it was pandemonium. The street was blocked off. There were people everywhere. There's fire trucks. There's police cars, and I had to literally drive my car on the grass on people's lawns to get up to the house.
Wow.
And I got there, and my mom was sitting in the back of the cruiser, the police cruiser in the driveway. And once I got out of the car, and the police confirmed that I was the oldest son. They told me what had happened. My mom had shot my dad, and he was inside the house dead. They were just waiting for the coroner to come and pronounce him dead.
Were any of the other siblings in the house, or is anybody else in the family?
Yeah, my 2 youngest siblings. Yeah, I'm the oldest of 5 children, and my youngest brother and sister were in the home. They were 10 and 12 at the time. I was 21 at the time it happened, and they were 10 or 12 years old.
Ronald, I can't imagine the different thoughts that go through your mind in a situation like that, because your first thought is, oh my God, my dad's dead. And your second thought is, my mom, I've got to worry about the fact of what are they going to do with her? What's the next step here? Because this actually happened. This is a real situation. There's no getting around it. Your dad died. Your mom killed your dad. And both those things are going on at exactly that same moment. How did you handle all that?
I mean, in hindsight, I have no idea. I just dove into it and did what needed to be done. I dealt with the calamity of, trying to make sure my dad had a proper burial while trying to keep my mom out of prison, and while trying to keep my own marriage together, which was on the rocks. And my wife and I were getting ready to get divorced. And I had 2 younger siblings. They were like one court hearing away from being put into foster care. I had to convince the court that I would be able to take care of them and my mom, when they released her on bond. And it was a juggling. I have no idea how I did. I was in school at the time. I was still finishing up my GM apprenticeship program, and there was a lot of moving pieces going. I just did what I had to do.
So with your mom, eventually she ended up getting probation for that event. Is that correct? Yes.
I mean, by the grace of God, she ended up. She had a first-degree murder charge, but we ended up getting it knocked down to she got lifetime probation. And after 5 years, we were able to get that knocked down to 5-year probation. They signed off and released her totally.
Wow. But in the meantime, your life is kind of going into a darker spiral. You get the pressures of everybody. Home life's not great. You just the whole world feels upside down. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. My life took a perfect spiral. My trajectory of my life took a perfect spiral from July 25th, 1980, my father was killed. And from that day forward, July 25th, 1986, I walked into prison on the anniversary of my father's death. And my life took a perfect spiral. You can see I started, abusing drugs. I started, abusing everything in my life. And I didn't care about anything anymore. And think about me, I've always been an aggressive person. So when you mix aggressiveness with apathy, you're not caring. It's like it's a dangerous mix. So I was just lucky I didn't get killed or kill somebody. I ended up in jail and prison.
Well, Ronald, you're going to have to walk me through this next thing that happens in your life, because when it first happens, first of all, you're not at that scene of that crime. And after it happens, the person that it happened to said it wasn't you. So can you walk me through how in the world this all stepped into your life?
Yeah, I mean, that was such a surreal set of circumstances. Even looking back on it now, all these years later, 35, 40 years later.
It's unbelievable.
It's still unbelievable. Like, I had a situation, my buddies, and there was 3 or 4 of us who were involved in this particular crime, me and 3 of my co-defendants. We were driving around Flint, Michigan that particular day. I was working at General Motors. I was going to work that afternoon, but I was running drug houses and stuff, so we were running around collecting money from spots we sold drugs from. And there's one particular spot we stopped at. The guy wasn't home. That I was, to go to collect the money. So I talked with his girlfriend and her friends. They were at the house. So my buddy and I, we sat there, laughed and talked with them for a few minutes, drank a couple of beers, and we left. And unbeknownst to us, the place is under surveillance. So a couple of blocks away from the apartment where they were surveilling, the car pulled us over and stopped us. They were, matter of fact, they were trailing us, and my buddy said, "Looks like somebody following us." I said, "Maybe it's the guy that owes us the money, so let's stop. It's probably him." So we stopped. I get out of the car, lean on the hood of the car, drinking beer. And so as the car pulls up behind us, this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon, mind, broad daylight. The car pulls up behind us. I'm like, "You guys recognize the guy?" It was a Z28 Camaro, and the guy was in, a denim jacket, and he had a Jerry curl. We all had Jerry curls back then.
The Jerry curl, yeah.
Yeah. So he gets out of the car and starts. He squats down in the door, pulling a gun.
Yeah.
And the previous week before that, my buddies and I, we had been in the shootout with some other drug dealers. So we thinking it's retaliation.
People. Yeah.
So the guy, he didn't announce himself. He didn't put a light in the car that he was a police officer or anything. So the shooting starts. I'm standing out in the open. I take off running because I didn't want to get hit by the bullets. So I ran away from the scene and jumped over a fence. And the cars took off. They drove. My buddies in my car. They took off driving, and the undercover car took off after them. 2 or 3 miles down the road, they run off the road again. There's a second shootout. This is where the officer is struck. He's struck in the arm. The people think he must have been killed. No, he had a flesh wound. It penetrated the jacket of his arm, went through and scratched his arm. So, it was a serious crime nonetheless, but he wasn't as seriously injured as everybody thought. And so I'm not at the scene of that. So I'm like, well, I wasn't overly concerned to being connected to that piece, the shooting piece of it, because I didn't have a gun. I wasn't part of either one of the shootings. So I thought it was a done deal. And the officer, in his original statement on the day of the event, he said he saw a black man wearing a gray jacket, which was me, standing outside the car. When the shooting started, I ran and jumped over the fence.
That was his testimony.
His written statement on the day of the event. 8 months later, at the time of the trial, just before trial, he wrote another statement saying, and when Ron jumped over the fence, it looked like he had a gun that was smoking. I'm like, he changed his whole statement up. And he changed it to fit the prosecutor's theory of the case. And that's kind of how it went. The prosecutor came up with this theory of how he thought the case happened. And so he tried to fit all the testimony to fit his theory. 2 of my co-defendants turned state's evidence, so they testified on behalf of the prosecutors. So they changed their stories to fit the prosecutor's theory of the case. The officer who got wounded changed his story to fit the prosecutor's theory of the case. And so what happened, the judge had ruled a lot of the stuff inadmissible because everything that happened after I got out of the car, the judge said it was inadmissible at trial. But yet the prosecutor introduced it anyway, and he injected into the trial 13 times, all the stuff that was ruled inadmissible. And every time we object, the judge would still let it in, even though he had ruled it inadmissible. So that's basically.
I got to say that this is the type of thing because I think Marvin Cotton Jr. and there's been some guys, Darrell Woods Sr. They've been on here. These are like horrifying stories because this could happen to anybody, because if you are around something or sometimes not even around something, but if it fits or you get somebody that says, hey, yeah, that guy kind of looks like that guy or whatever the case is. If it fits the narrative of what the prosecutor needs to have to make it work, then all those they're just pushed in the square peg in a round hole and away it goes. Because once you have that narrative and you become part of it because they've plucked you out, it's incredible how fast that momentum goes that you can't catch the edge to hold on.
Exactly.
So you get into this.
It's like this the old adage where like a grand jury say a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich.
Well, here's something I think a lot of people don't know. The reason why they say a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that a grand jury exists and only one side is presented. There is no defense. There's no defense that goes into a grand jury. It's only presented by the prosecution, and the prosecution walks into there and they present their case. And they say why they think their case is good. And those people listen and say, that sounds pretty bad. But there's nobody defending the person who's being accused. And I don't think most people know that that's what the grand jury does. I think that people assume that a grand jury is like a jury in a courtroom, that they hear both sides. Everybody gets to hear, and be defended. And, you got the prosecution opening statement, you got the defense opening statement, closing statement, none of that. It's not a trial. It's one side One
Right.
side, prosecution says, hey, what do you think of this and this and this? And hey, look at this. And you can't blame the grand jury. They're only given one side of the deal.
Right.
And there you are.
Yeah, but in my case, I actually had a trial.
Yeah,
but
you had a trial.
It felt like a grand jury because the jury they just agree with everything the prosecutor threw out there.
So when you went into that trial, Ronald, did you know already that the police officer had changed his testimony?
Yes, because a week before the trial started, my attorney called me in because he had gotten the statements. He called me into his office and said, hey, the police officer is saying this now. And he wasn't that concerned. He said, we can refute that because we have his original statement where he didn't say any of this stuff.
Right.
And so we tried to impeach the police officer on his own statement. The jury still bought the change statement.
Wow. So the day of, when those people walk back in there, what are you thinking, Ronald?
I'm thinking, I'm not going to get convicted of this because I wasn't there. I mean, I didn't have a gun. I wasn't there. And none of it pertained to me other than me being there at the initial when it first started. Yeah. And when they came back guilty, I was flabbergasted. I'm like, this can't be happening.
And then sentencing happened. And what did they sentence you to?
30 to 50 years.
And how old were you at the time?
27.
Wow. So you go to a maximum security prison.
Yep.
Walk me through the gates of that day.
Oh man, I mean, walking through the first day of prison is like it's unbelievable. When it was in the middle. It was July 25th, 1986. It's hot as heck. They put me and like four other guys in the back of it was a converted truck, like a dog catcher truck. They put us in the back of the sweltering hot truck, no air, no ventilation, other than, the little holes, and transport us an hour and a half down 90 miles to Jackson Penitentiary. And when we get out, they herd us into this holding area with, 40, 50 other guys, hot as hell, everybody's sweating, hot, smelly men. And, you got to go through the shower procedure, get deloused, and you get photographed and go through all this fingerprinting and what have you. And at Jackson, they have they call it the slide. It's when you get through getting processed, this huge red door slides, sounds like the gates of hell slides open. It goes, clang, and you walk through that door and you go down this deep incline into the quarantine area. And as you're walking down the slide, it closes behind you, clang, and it's like, it's bone jarring. I mean, even hearing it, repeating it right now,
it gives you some PTSD.
I'm feeling chills right now just repeating it because I'm thinking I'm reliving it.
Yeah. And
then you walk into the quarantine area and it's like 400 guys screaming and hollering, throwing paper and trash out onto the floors from the galleries, and it was just pandemonium. And you walk into that madness, he's like, man, how in the hell am I going to survive this?
Yeah, yeah. Did you know anybody? Or were you totally just Ronald on your own?
I knew people because I was living a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like Dr. Jekyll, Mr.
Yeah.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I was living two lives on the street, so I knew people from the street. When I got to prison, I knew people.
Yeah.
And I was 27 years old. So I was older than the average person going to prison. Most people go to prison 18, 19, 20, 22. When I got in 27, I'm almost like an elder statesman. They calling me old school at 27.
I was old. I was 47. I was OG.
Oh, yeah, you were really old. Yeah. Exactly. So you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people are younger. So you get in there and you describe, Ronald, that you do your time in layers, and those first few years you're angry.
Oh man, yes. I tell people when I do public speaking that you do time in phases. My first 5 years, I was angry because I knew I was in there. I was wrong. I knew I was in there wrongfully. I was still in that street mentality. So I was certainly part of the problem in prison and not part of the solution. I was part of running drugs and fights and stabbings. I mean, everything negative. I had my hand in it. And one day I read a book. A friend of mine brought me a book. A woman I worked with at General Motors brought a book to me in 1990. I'll never forget it, called Visions for Black Men. And it's a 90-page paperback by a professor from Florida State and Dr. Naeem Akbar. and it's a beautiful, short, powerful book. The first 21 pages talks about the transformation from male to boy to man, and I read that, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because one thing about me, I hate being a hypocrite about anything in my life. I'm going to be a fool. I'm going to be a damn fool. If I'm going to be good, I'm going to be very good. So I read this book, and I've always holding myself out to be a man. By 1990, you know, I'm about 32, 33 years old. So I'm a man. I'm thinking, I read this book. I said, oh, man, I'm barely functioning at the level of boy. I felt punked. Yeah. So I said, I got to change my life. I got to do something different because I'm nowhere near being a man. I'm a detriment to my community. So I wanted to convert myself from being a detriment to become a asset to the community.
So it really happened by just by taking that book, that 90 pages. You revealed your life and said, "Hey, I'm not there. I gotta do a lot of things different," and it started there.
Yeah, wow. And it's funny because the book came at the right time because at that 5 years mark. Yeah. I was tired of the life I was living. I was tired of being proud on the yard. I was tired of fighting and running around doing all the foolish stuff. I was just tired of that because I knew I could do better. Yeah. Because I went to prison with a college education. 90% of people in Michigan in prison didn't have even a high school education at the time I went in. So I knew I could do better. So when I read that book, came at the right time. I was tired of being a fool, and I wanted to change. And that book gave me reason and a direction in which to change.
What did you start doing, Ronald?
I became an advocate. I started studying the law. I got elected to in Michigan prison. They have a program called the Warden's Forum, and it's a group of guys that's elected by the people, the population, to represent them with the issues to the warden we can meet once a month and discuss whatever issues going on in the prison. So I got elected to represent the population as one of the representatives, and I ended up becoming the chairman of the Warden Forum for a number of years, and it just built my advocacy. I felt like, you know, I dove into helping everybody else and stopped worrying about helping me. I said, I'm here till I'm here. I'm just going to fight my case, and I'm going to try to help as many people as I can. And that's went in that direction.
So really, when you started reaching out and helping people, that helped you and your time.
Man, and I mean, the thing, when I stopped focusing on me and focusing on helping others, things happened that I never even could have dreamed happened. People came into my life to assist me that I never even thought would show up. It's like the gates opened up. I said, man, this is different. You know, I had a friend of mine that was a Genesee County commissioner, and they helped me secure some documents I had been trying to get to help litigate my case. And other people stepped in and helped with doing community advocacy, getting signature letters. People were writing letters on my behalf. One person had a signature campaign. They secured 5,000 signatures in support of my release and these type of things. So when I stopped focusing on me, all these other things start happening on my behalf.
So, at the same time, Ronald, you've got your kids out there, and of course your mom and your other siblings. What was all that like? Did it work? Did you get visits? Did they in your life? How did things progress with your family?
I mean, that situation. My children at the time. I was married to my second wife at the time, and she was real diligent about bringing my children. I had one child. My youngest child was about her, but she would bring all four of my children. She would go pick the other ones up and bring them at least once a month to come see me. And so that went on like the first 9 years of my incarceration. But even it was a strained relationship. I mean, I kept as close as I could, even under those conditions. But as time went on, the relationships became more distant, became more strained. It's a matter of, out of sight, out of mind. People think you're never coming home because everybody was saying, well, if you come home, my mom and we always had a conversation. She said, well, Ronnie, if you come home, and I would admonish her, it's not if I come home, it's when I come home. Yeah. Because I know I'm coming home because I'm innocent of this crime. Mm-hmm. And everybody in prison said they're innocent, so nobody really believes you're innocent. Like, yeah, wink, wink, you're innocent.
Everybody's a professional athlete. Everybody's a millionaire. Everybody's innocent.
Exactly. Yeah, you know how it goes. Everybody on the yard is innocent. When you profess your innocence, it's like, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. And you really were. Did you feel, I mean, I can't imagine with that amount of time that you were given, basically 50 years, and you knew, because it was obvious that you didn't do this and you were living your life in a prison, maximum security prison, and having to live it knowing you were innocent.
Absolutely. And prison is no cakewalk. Trust me. I mean, it's like, I mean, you can get killed at a moment. You have to be totally aware of your surroundings, even in your sleep, because things happen. It's like you walking a tightrope. It's more, people think it's dangerous on the street, and it is. But in prison, it's a microcosm of what goes on in the street, because everybody that's in prison, 90% of them are, they were troublemakers on the street. So it's like you're dealing with that type of mentality every day. And add on top of that, the mental health factor. A lot of people have mental health issues in prison. You never know when somebody's going to snap. Even if they don't have mental issues, prison creates mental health issues. So people get bad news from home, and all of a sudden they give up. Now, they want to stab everybody. They'll jump off the gallery, or, you be in the way and you be standing from in the line. They just decide they want to stab you because you're standing there.
The hard time.
So you have to navigate that.
No, it's you and you walk around looking and making sure that you know everything that's going on, and it is like a boiling pot. Everybody's on their heightened tenseness anyway, because it's not great, and anything that could be I remember we got in a fight one time over country music, and it was like, how the hell did that happen? That was such a why in the hell did that even? What happened? But
exactly.
You also, I mean, did you spend time in the hole and all that too, Ron? When you were going through all that?
I spent, out of the 27 years I was in prison, I spent like a total of 3 years in the hole. I spent the longest stretch was about 18 months.
It's a long time.
18 months, 6 months, 3 months, that kind of. I spent like a total of 3 years.
And I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, usually the hole's at 23 hours in and 1 hour out. Is that kind of what you were? And
that's exactly.
You get to shower maybe 3 times a week. And,
3 times a week. Yep. Maybe.
People yelling and screaming.
Yep.
All through the night, like some kind of weird planet that you're not from.
Exactly. I mean, I had stress headaches and didn't even realize why I was having headaches. And when I saw healthcare. And so you just stressed out from all the noise and stuff. I said, I'm not having these migraines, these crazy headaches. And I'm laying in this cell. It was like from the banging and screaming, like I say, all night, because in solitary, people sleep during the day and then they're up all night screaming and hollering, and you trying to sleep at night. So it's like it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, I never really understood the whole screaming thing. I remember I was shipped up to Warren County Jail in Missouri, and it was a jail, and it was like immediately when the doors slammed shut, they all started screaming. And I was like, I don't understand what we're doing here. This doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, no rhyme or reason.
Doesn't make any sense. So, Ronald, you're in prison, and bad news in prison feels like the most suffocating type of news, because you're locked in. You don't feel like you have control of what's going on the outside, and you receive the worst news in prison.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If I never forget, Father's Day 2001, I was sitting in prison in Lapeer, Michigan, waiting for my children. I talked to my son that morning. I said I have 4 children, my son and 3 daughters. And I talked to him that morning. Hey, Dad, I'm going to pick the girls up, and we're going to come visit you this afternoon. And, in prison, visitors from your children is like the best thing ever.
Best.
Like, man, it's like, I thought, oh, fantastic, great. I get to see my children. So, you go through the routine. You go shower. Yeah. You lay on your bunk. You don't want to get sweaty. You just sitting there waiting. The time, the clock is ticking by, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Nobody shows up. I'm like, what's going on? So I start making phone calls all around, the city of Flint. I called my ex-wife and didn't find her. Called my children, couldn't find them. Called my mom, couldn't find her. Of all people, I called my ex-mother-in-law. Say, Mom, have you seen the kids? They're supposed to come visit. And she was like, you haven't heard? I said, no, what's going on? Little Ronnie been shot and killed. I said, you kidding? She said, no, everybody's out of the hospital. And, they're making arrangements now for his body. I'm like, are you kidding? On Father's Day 2001, I get news that my only son has been shot and killed by a 14-year-old juvenile in Flint, Michigan.
Gosh.
I can't even begin to tell you, the feeling. I can't even process the feeling now. Even it's been, 21 years later, it's still confusing. I still, tear up about it. Like, I don't understand it, but it's one of those things that happen. Things happen in life for a reason, even though you don't always understand the reason. And for me, this was one of those situations.
I just can't imagine, Ronald. And how old was he at the time?
He was 21.
21.
And his girlfriend was pregnant with his son. His son was born 2 months after a month and a half after he died. My son died on Father's Day, 2001. His son was born August 1st, 2001.
So as this progresses, this is the boy that killed your son was a juvenile, and can you kind of walk me through your thought process of how this all came about, of how they were going to prosecute him, and how you advocated for something else to happen?
Sure. In Michigan at the time, and even now, Michigan has for juveniles that commit murder, and if they're found guilty, they're sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And I didn't wish prison on my worst enemy. I did absolutely not. I didn't wish prison on the guys that testified against me, because prison is such a horrible experience. And for a 14-year-old kid who had the rest of his life in front of him to be sent to life, adult prison, to me, served no useful purpose. It wasn't going to bring my son back. It wasn't going to do anything but further erode the fabric of our society, because another young man is going to jail for the rest of his life and not have a chance. So I advocated for this child to be given a second chance. I advocated for him to be treated as a juvenile, and I tried as an adult, because they try them as adults when they commit murder in Michigan. And it took some finagling, because the prosecutor wanted to try him as an adult, and they weren't, they didn't consider me as a victim. I wasn't a traditional victim. I'm black and I'm in prison, and I'm advocating for, as a family member of my son who was murdered. As your son,
yeah.
Yeah, so they were ignoring me till I pushed the campaign, and I ended up getting, the court kind of agreed, and the prosecutor changed their mind and ended up trying him as a juvenile. I had to convince my ex-wife, my son's mother, to go along, because at first, mother's reacting that she thought the kid should get life in prison. Sure. She wanted no part of advocating on his behalf. And I had to tell her, I said, look, you profess to be the mother of a church, and, what would Jesus do since you're so religious? Mm-hmm. And it made her think. It took a number of visits for her coming back and forth, us having this conversation. And she finally acquiesced and said, okay, I won't object to him being tried as a juvenile. And so it happened.
Wow. How did you, Ronald, in that type of situation, were you numb? How do you, when you find out your son dies in prison, when you're in prison, what kind of strategies did you use to step through that?
Well, I mean, for me, by that time, I had my life had changed. My life was 2001 by now, mm-hmm. and I had 10 years of changing my life direction. And I was like, I used to be the guy that people come to for counseling in prison when they get bad news from home. And like I told you earlier, I hate to be a hypocrite, so I had to apply my own strategy to myself. Things I tell other people they should do in these times, I could not do it myself. I'd be a hypocrite. So I practiced the same thing that I preach. I forgave the child. I practiced forgiveness. I was the head of a religious organization at the time. So I understood second chances and redemption. And a 14-year-old kid certainly deserved a second chance and deserved redemption, and not to be judged by the worst decision that he made in his young 14-year-old life. So for me, it was after 2 or 3 weeks after the numbness wore off, and I kind of like, man, I got to do something to help this kid, and not woe is me. I was able to make that transition, actually, advocate and help the child. Which
I guess probably helped you get through that grief, maybe, because you were busying yourself into advocating for him. And from what I understand by reading some of the things that you'd sent me, that young man ended up 6 or 7 years and then came out and is doing pretty well in society.
Yeah, he went to prison he went to jail at 14, and at 21 they reviewed his sentence, because he was able, if he hadn't improved enough by the time he turned 21, they could actually charge him as an adult and continue his sentence on. But he had made enough progress during that time. I had kept some touch with him over the years and written him letters, remind him of his responsibility and what have you. So at 21 in 2008 or 2009, they released him, and he hasn't gone back to prison or jail or anything. I mean, he hasn't been elected president, but
well, but strangely enough, you had the connection between the fact that he's the brother of your son's the mother
girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
Yeah, he's my
he'd be the uncle of your son's
uncle of my grandson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that confusing?
It really is. I mean, it's really something. That's
He's
all tied in like
my
that.
My son's girlfriend's brother, who is ended up being the uncle of my grandson.
And how is your grandson? Is he good?
He's struggling. He's in prison right now. He's struggling.
He's struggling.
He's struggling. He just turned 21 a week or so ago, and he's in prison right now. He called me earlier today, and he's just struggling. I try to, over the years, I kept close contact with him when I came home and spent time with him, and imparted everything I could to teach him, to stay on the right path. And he's just doing what he's doing, and he's surviving. He isn't going for a serious crime. He's supposed to get out in October, but he just can't get right. He's struggling with maneuvering this whole process of life.
Yeah. Well, so your life, as you're helping with this paralegal and you're learning the legal system, you're advocating for others, you're advocating for yourself. When did things start turning for you, Ronald? When you start thinking, hey, I might have a shot here. You've been in for a long time, but things legally had to have started giving some type of light at the end of the tunnel. When did that happen for you?
Well, for me, I always maintain my innocence, of course, and I was savvy enough to keep my case alive because in the mid '90s they passed this the 1994 crime bill.
Yeah, big crime bill.
Passed, and the crime bill, out of that it came some acts, Anti-Terrorism Death Penalty Act, and what that did, and which is so crazy, I don't know how they connected appeals to the death penalty and terrorism, but it limited your time to get in court. So after 1996. If you didn't have your case in federal court within 1 year, you lost all rights to appeal it.
Wow.
Unless you fit into a minimal, they had an exception. And I worked that exception to death. I kept filing stuff every time the time limit would get ready to run out. I filed something just to keep it live. And I was able to get the courts to actually look at my case. But what helped me was in 2003, the trial court, I had filed a motion for relief from judgment. And the court thought I should get I had a new judge at the time because my old judge, Simpson judge, had retired. The new judge thought I should get some relief. He didn't think he had jurisdiction to do it. So he wrote a 30-page opinion outlining why I should get relief. And that's what I based my habeas corpus petition on. And the federal courts read it and looked at it and they agreed. And so I got some action.
So then on your 24th year, you get your conviction overturned, and there's a lot that goes on in the courtroom with this whole thing. I guess that's the year 27. You have to go 3 more years. Yeah. Tell me about the day that you find out that you get it overturned, though.
I get called up to the control center to get legal mail. Legal mail. Ron goes get it. So I go to control center. I get lots of legal mail because I'm involved in lots of litigation. So I didn't think anything about it. I go get it. I look at it, and I said, "Okay, what's this from the federal courts?" I'm just thinking if they could deny something or just it's an extension, but the prosecutor requested. I opened it and it said. I went down to the bottom to the dark print and said, we grant petitioner's habeas corpus and reverse and remand his sentence. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
It was like as when I got convicted. I was walking back to the cell. I put the letter back in the envelope thinking I misread it. So I walked back to my cell and I sat down. I took a deep breath and I pulled it out again. And this time I read the whole page. I said, oh my God, they overturned my conviction. That was in 2009, year 24. I said, oh my God. So I was like, here we go. So from there, it's like, but the crazy part about it, what you mentioned, I couldn't get out for 3 more years. The prosecutor, the state appealed my reversal. And so the federal courts held it. They held my reversal, my release in abeyance until, another time. So, which was crazy because now I'm back at pretrial status. I'm filing motions to release, pretrial release. Yeah. I'm filing motions to every court, and no court would take responsibility. The court that reversed it said they didn't have jurisdiction because the appellate court had it. The appellate court said the trial court had jurisdiction on bail, and the trial court said we don't have it until they send it back to it. So I went for 3 years. I went back
you all around. See, I don't think people understand. I don't think people understand that can happen where you get lost in the system, even though you've got the right judgment. You can't find your way out because they do everything they can to keep you. Sometimes it can take years, which in your case it did, 3 more years. But then when you got there, that trial judge, I guess it was the trial judge. I don't know if it was a judge.
Yeah.
He had to actually work overtime to make it work because they were being so hard on you.
Yeah, the judge, when I went back for the hearing, for me to be either retried or released, the judge said, the prosecutor said, we don't want to retry him because the case had been gutted. The federal court said, this is inadmissible, you can't use this. They laid down hard lines what could and couldn't be used. So they didn't have a case. And so they were fine with releasing me. And the judge said, well, I'm going to let him go home from court today. But the Department of Corrections officer said, well, we have orders to bring him back to the prison no matter what happens. And the judge was like, you're kidding me. I'm the judge. I'm releasing him from right now. And they said, no, we got to take him back. So the judge said, wait a minute. He adjourned. He went back and called Central Law, called the Department of Corrections. Hey, I want to let this guy go right now because, his conviction, his time is done. They said, no, we got to recalculate his time, make sure he serves it all. The judge was like, you're kidding. So the judge came back on the record. He was beat red. He was livid. I mean, he almost said cuss words on the stand. He was so hot. He said, I'm resentencing Mr. Simpson to, I think it was something to 15. My maximum was like 15 years, 10 to 15 he resentenced me to. And so I was like 12 years past my maximum out date to make sure that they had to let me go when I got back to the prison. No, there was no calculation in the world that could keep me. So that was even crazy because the department, they were mad at me because of my litigation activities during prison.
Sure, right. You were that guy.
Yeah, exactly. I sued them. I sued and me and my buddy sued the state on a property lawsuit and won. So, and it took 18 years for that. So they were mad about that.
Well, tell me about walking out of there after 27 years.
Man. I felt like when my family come and picked me up from the prison I was released from that afternoon, I was in tears because I was at a minimum security at this time. And so as we driving away, minimum security out front, and all the guys are along the fence. It's like one of those prison movies where you see the protagonist, he's going home and everybody's waving him home. And these guys, I had done 27 years, but these guys are closer to my own family, man. I was crying.
Yeah.
I was literally
because they were your family. You've been there for 27 years.
Yeah, they were my family.
Oh man. And I think back on that, and I didn't do anything close to the time that you did. I was sentenced to 5 years and did 3 years. But I do remember, though, Ronald, that time I was so excited to walk out the door, but I also had a guy that I was leaving that I was so close to. We did everything together, walked together, ate together, everything, watched movies together, all this stuff. And it's almost like you're kind of leaving somebody on the battlefield when you're getting to go home. It's just that. But for everything in the world, you want to walk this way, but you feel bad for that person. But
you feel a deep sense of abandonment.
You do.
Like you abandon.
It's a weird thing.
Your comrade on the field. You abandoning him.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. But boy, when you walk through that door and you feel that sense of freedom back, there's nothing like it, right?
Yeah, it's unnerving. It's like, ooh, am I? You feel nervous walking out the front door. You're not in belly chains and shackles.
It's hard to look cool in shackles.
Like, okay, where's the guards to come to take me back in? That's what you're looking for. Let's get out of here.
Looking over your shoulder. You got to jump in that car fast.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think I've heard you say this. You've said this too. You said it felt like it was Fred Flintstone meeting the Jetsons.
Yes. Yeah. When I got home, I felt like Fred Flintstone on the set of the Jetsons. Nothing was familiar. Like when I went to prison in '85, microwaves were like the most high-tech appliance in the home. And at that time, they were still an overpriced, underpowered piece of crap. It cost like $500 and take like 10 minutes to boil a cup of water.
Exactly.
So then when I came home, the cars were talking to each other, keyless entry, and they had the internet, cell phones, laptop computers. None of the stuff was in existence when I went to prison. So I was like a deer in the headlights.
That's just crazy. And it's all the different things you think of that changed. I mean, because, you look at, phones. I mean, I guess there were car phones in the 90s, but, people carrying around phones, that all happened while you were in there. And the internet,
there were no car phones in the 80s.
That's right.
They did have a portable phone. It was like the size of a carry-on suitcase that you carry on to the airport. And only a handful of people had them because they were so doggone expensive. And pagers. So it was a totally different world.
What was life like for you getting back into society?
It was. I mean, it was interesting. It was a study in contrast. I mean, I was so excited to be back, but it was anxious and depressing at the same time because it was like sensory over. You live in a 27 years of sensory deprivation, and you drop back into a world that is hyper stimulated. So it's sensory overload. You know, 3 or 4 days after I was home, I never forget. I got my mom's car. I went to stay with her when I first got out. And I said, hey, Mom, I'm going to the grocery store to get some breakfast food. You want something? Yeah, bring me back a box of shredded wheat. You know, when I went to prison, shredded wheat was a big 4-inch biscuit. So, you know, what's hard about that? I get to the cereal aisle. There's like 3 rolls of shredded wheat, like 10. I mean, it was crazy. I stood there looking at all the different boxes. And I didn't realize 30 minutes later, I'm still looking at the boxes of shredded wheat. And I looked, damn, look, 30 minutes. It was overwhelming. I just grabbed the box and walked out the store. I said, I got to go. And then people would come to visit. A lot of people come by my mom's to visit. They heard I was home. It became so overwhelming that I just left one day and went to a friend. Didn't tell anybody where I was going because I wanted to unplug. I couldn't deal with, you know, the chaos of people coming in and out because I'm in prison. You know, I didn't like that kind of confusion. I tried to stay away from it. So it was real. It was a challenge.
So when you because you stepped in and started doing some great work, how did you get all connected with that, Ronald? How did you step into the work that you're at now? But was it difficult to get to where you are? What all happened?
Not really. It was kind of I was an advocate while I was inside. 25 of the 27 years I was inside, I was an advocating for myself and other people and changing the conditions of confinement inside prison. So it was kind of a natural progression when I got out. I had so many years invested in. I said, well, I'm not going back to General Motors. So I invested in myself and trying to get in a job that would be, I could use the skills that I had developed while I was in prison. So I got hired by an organization called American Friends Service Committee, which is an international organization that does justice work. And they hired me as a program associate, and I developed some programs with them. In 2014, I was speaking at an event at the University of Michigan, and the founder of Just Leadership USA, Glenn Martin, was the keynote speaker, and I was on a panel. And he came to me afterwards, hey, I'm launching this leadership program. I think you'd be a perfect candidate for us. You know, you want to get in. So he gave me all the information. I applied for it, and about 6 months later, I get accepted. In 2015, I was in the first leadership development cohort that Just Leadership had. And I loved it so much. I said, this would be my dream job. In 2016, I graduated at the end of 2015. January 2016, he made me a job offer. I was one of the first 5 people hired by the organization. And I've been there ever since. I'm the longest serving team member on the team.
Well, you're executive vice president now. I mean,
yeah, I'm second in command now.
Yeah, Just Leadership USA.
Yes.
Can you tell the listeners kind of what that organization does?
Yes, we are the only national criminal justice reform organization that was founded by and operated by directly impacted people that have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system. And we do criminal justice reform work. We do policy work. Our flagship program, we do leadership development training to elevate people that have been impacted by the system to do advocacy work around policy work in their own communities to advocate for better conditions. And so we currently have trained, since 2015, we've trained 1,300 people in 45 states plus Washington, D.C. So we have a heck of a network.
Wow. We
do a lot of work. We do policy work in D.C. We do trainings all over the country. And it's just a plethora of things that we do. It's a lot of work. And it's positive work, it's powerful work, and it's impactful work. So you should go to our website and check us out.
I think it's so cool. And the other thing that I think is so, I guess the word's inspiring, Ronald, is that you could have been the most bitter, angry man and really just balled up in a fetal position and been mad at the world. You did exactly the opposite of that. You decided you were going to step through this, being wrongly accused, decided you were going to start helping people. And now you've continued that work on the outside, and it spews out of you. I mean, you every time I talk to you, you are a very positive man. And I guess it kind of shows you that, if you're wired a certain way and your mindset's a certain way, you just can't beat that out of you.
No, I mean, what good is negativity? Negativity does nobody any good. I mean, doesn't do you any good? Doesn't do the community any good? Everybody around you make everybody around you miserable. I don't like misery. I mean, I love to be joyous. I like to be, happy. So I try to approach my life in that manner. It's like, yeah, I could have been bitter. I could have been angry. Like, and when I got out, Michigan, I didn't get compensated. People think I got a lot of money when I got out. Michigan didn't have compensation laws. And I helped lead a campaign when I got out. People now get $50,000 a year for wrongful convictions in Michigan, but it wasn't retroactive, so I didn't get it, which is fine. I'm like, open up the door. You let me out, I'll make my own money.
And you have.
So, I mean, just have to be positive in life. And positive things will come to you.
So looking at your situation and everything that's happened, Ronald, I mean, it's been a journey of everything that you've walked through. What do you think is your biggest takeaway from all that you've been through that you'd tell somebody else about how this impacted your life and what you would tell them?
I think for me, I mean, I kind of live by the premise of that the work that I do and everything I try to do, I frame it in the concept of trying to put the humanity back into being human. We've gotten away from being human. We treat each other like crap. I mean, we as humans, it's like we do the most horrific things to each other. So I try to be the change that I want to see. So I work from the premise of let's put the humanity back in being human. So everything I do is from that perspective. I work through that lens. Everything that I do, I try to put the humanity back in being human. I
like that. And you, like you said, you're living the life of what you want to see as a change. And that's where you start from because people respond to that.
Yes, sir.
That's good stuff, Ronald. What haven't I asked you that you want to share?
Nothing I can think of at the moment. I got to jump to another call. I'm supposed to be on a call on a staff meeting right now. I just text my president. Hey, I'll join you in just a minute.
Yeah, we're in the good stuff right here. Hey, so
yeah.
Well, Ronald, I appreciate and I want to thank Chantel Fisher, who connected us. Who was a person who's doing great work, and she connected me to Ronald. So I really appreciate that, Chantel, out there.
Yes. I met Chantel through one of our training programs, one of our 2-day training programs. She participated in back in 2015.
That's great. What a small world. Yep. What a small world. Yep. Ronald, you're doing great things. Wrapping up, for anybody who's looking for a book out there, I've got one. I wrote one called Nightmare Success. Love the likes on social media, the comments. On Spotify, if you want to subscribe, just hit that little bell button. On Apple, go to those little 3 things in the side upper corner and hit follow show. Leave me a message on BrentCassidy.com. As I used to say when I was riding from prison, stay strong, and I'll do the same. Ronald, thank you, my man. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Nightmare Success.
Thank you,
in and
yes,
out.
Sir.
Thanks for being here today.